Good morning. Daniel Parker with Parker Executive Search. I'm here with a great panel, two of the best directors of athletics in the business to talk about crisis management. So today we have Judy Rose, Director of Athletics from Charlotte. Thanks for joining us, Judy.
Thanks for having me.
And Mary Ellen Gillespie, the new Athletic Director at the University of Hartford. Thanks for joining us, Mary Ellen.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to just jump right in and talk a little bit about a hot topic right now in college athletics and really in the world in general, and talk about how you handle crisis on your campus. It's not a matter of if, it's just when it's going to happen and how you handle it. So first question, Judy, when a crisis hits your desk, what type of matrix do you use with that decision-making process to really work through that crisis?
Well, actually, we have a written crisis management plan, and I've kind of laughed a little bit when I was asked to serve on this because it did make me think, when was the last time we reviewed that plan? And we used to do it on an annual basis. Not that things really change within the plan, within the structure of the plan, but just again to refresh everybody's memory. So that was certainly something I learned most recently. One of those aha moments. We haven't done that lately, but we've certainly had crisis. So just pulling together that senior management team,
Right.
that each has responsibilities, and who's going to contact whom. And the emotional piece of all of it, once we get past that emotional piece, just making sure that the plan still protects and takes care of our most important resources, which are our people. Whether it be the student athletes that have been in danger, or something has happened, or the coaches, or our family, the 49er family.
When you pulled out that plan and started going over it with your senior staff, was there things that you said, wow, we may need to update this? This is something we need to reassess?
I haven't pulled it out. As a result of being asked to serve on this panel,
Right.
I said, aha.
Oh, gotcha.
We haven't done this. When I go back, absolutely.
Gotcha. Very good. Mary Ellen, how about you?
We have a similar process. We do have a crisis management plan, but we're also very tied into the university's overall crisis management plan. The university meets, there's almost a student response team that meets every week on campus that really goes over what are the blips on the radar screen that we've had to deal with over the past week, and athletics has a seat at that table. And so we also want to make sure that a crisis management plan in athletics is inclusive of the other areas on campus, because you don't want that to be the first time you're dealing with your colleagues across campus, the first time athletics has a crisis, or when the university has a crisis and athletics has to be involved as well. You want that cohesive relationship.
How about a recent example of a crisis? I know you get this asked, and you've probably thought about this. You probably have one every week or every day. But how about a recent example of what you would consider maybe a typical crisis? Is there such a thing as a typical crisis, or something you had to work through in your department?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you have to take a look at. What do you know? How do you know it? But the other piece is what we talked about it earlier. What is a crisis to most people, and it can be very different. I mean, we put a lot of fires out every day in our business, but I would say, a recent crisis that we had deals with a student athlete and probably the health and safety of a student athlete. And what we do is we pull together our senior team and our welfare team, but we also pull in our colleagues across campus, our counseling center, our dean of students office, our campus police. And then I always, you have to have a great relationship with my supervisor, so I always keep my chancellor informed. Even if we don't have all the exact accurate information, it's, okay, here's what we know, here's how we know it, here's what we're doing, and I will continue to keep you updated as we go through this process.
Judy, how do you document a crisis, you and your team? I assume that there's some type of process there when this crisis hits that you want to make sure you have documentation to track everything.
Well, after it's over, and actually while it is going on, we do put everything in writing about the crisis for several reasons. One, to make sure that our memory is still there for it, and that all of the actions that we took, they may or may not have been the correct action at the time or the perfect action, but it gives us a template for us to go back and say, okay, here's what we did. What would we / should we have done differently in that regard? So there is always a written portion with that.
Do you ever go back on a crisis that you maybe had in the past and look at that documentation and say maybe we could have done something a little bit different? Can you think of maybe an example?
You know, I can't really, but I'm sure there have been some. You know, I mentioned to both of you earlier, we've had, unfortunately, the death of student athletes. We've had the death of a coach. Now, one was like she had cancer, so we knew it was coming, and you could prepare a little better for that. Yeah. When there's a car accident or a drowning, like we had mentioned, those things just disrupt your whole world. And trying to take some of the emotion out of it for all of us so that we can focus on what needs to be done. Yeah. Because your emotions can cloud it, I mean, tremendously. And again, just the focal point being on the people, just like Mary Ellen, we have a comprehensive crisis management plan. It is not athletics in a silo by any means. And everybody is involved in who we call immediately. And like her, the chancellor is the top of the list on some of those. But we had one recently with a pretty high-profile football player. And I'm on my way over to campus to meet with women's basketball recruit, and I get a call and on a Sunday morning, and I see it's from the chief of police. And you know when you get those calls at weird hours, it is not a good thing. And I'm like, wonder which sport this is. I was thinking, you know, and I'm like,
trying to predict.
Basketball lost last night. They got back from Old Dominion. Might have done something crazy. Don't know. You hope not. I'm like, football's out of season, but there's 120 of them. You know, you just you go through that in your mind, and then I couldn't get the chief of police on the phone. He was talking to somebody else, so I get a call from the sport administrator for football. I said, yes, I know which sport it is now, but it was a high-profile one, and accused sexual assault, and it is still going on. I mean, so we're out of it, but we dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's, contacted Title IX office immediately on campus once we were made aware of the accusation. And anytime it's a high-profile athlete, you know, the media gets a hold of it. We were very fortunate in that case that we knew ahead of time before the media got it, so we could get our ducks in a row.
I think I wanted you to expand a little bit. You talked about a high-profile sport. Does your plan differ if it's a high-profile, like a football or basketball student athlete, where you know the media is going to be involved, versus maybe a sport that's a little less high-profile?
It doesn't really change. I think you speed it up a little bit.
Okay. Because you know it's going to get out.
You know it's going to get out, and you want to get ahead of that as much as possible. Not that you're trying to change the facts, just so that you can control how it gets out and have some input there. Because we're never trying to hide any portion of it, but you do want to protect the individuals involved as much as possible and protect the brand.
Yeah. Mary Ellen, you have background in student affairs, so you've seen crisis, I'm sure, in student affairs side and also athletics side. Is there, back to the documentation, is there a difference in how it should be handled or documented, whether it's on campus or in the athletic department?
There really isn't. I think you all fall under the umbrella of the overall institution, and so you're following the policies put in place by the university leadership. And in student affairs, you know, at the end of the day, they're all students, and whether it's a member of a fraternity or a member of a basketball team, you treat the students, you know, in crisis management just like you would treat all students. And so there really isn't a difference. And the good part is when you have good working relationships across campus, it's easier to form that crisis management team and help everybody through that situation.
When do you get your chancellor or president involved? I'm sure early in the process, as soon as you know?
First phone call.
Yeah. How about other administrators, staff, after you call your president and chancellor? Who else? You talked about chief of police, Judy, of course. I'm sure chief of police calling you in the middle of the night is not the phone call you're looking for, but who are those other, I guess, team members that you want involved in that crisis?
Well, at Green Bay, our crisis management team really consists of the chief of police, our Title IX officer, our dean of students, our conduct officer, our senior woman administrator. That's really the university crisis management team, and then every department has their key essential employees that have to be involved and included. So in athletics, obviously I would be at the table, sport administrator, and really we have a very small executive staff team, but we work really closely together. So the four of us would get involved and kind of be part of that expanded.
Judy, how about for you? Who's part of that team?
The only other addition I would make, and I'm sure they do this as well, the head coach. Right up there with the chancellor, and I'm not sure which. I usually call the head coach first because I want to get that side of the story. If there is a side to be given, sometimes it's just an incident that occurred, like I said, the death of a student athlete or something, and then the other is maybe someone's been accused of something, and those are treated a little bit differently because I want to get the head coach's side of what's going on, and then I'll call the chancellor and make him aware. But the sport administrator, just like Mary Ellen said, is one that I immediately get involved, and senior staff. And we have that same type of org chart she's talking about across campus. Dean of Students Office is immediately contacted. And, I think for all of us, and I've been at Charlotte for 42 years, so developing those relationships with the people on campus, not to change any of the format, but to know they're there to be a part of the team. And you're going to get a fair hearing, just like a student athlete's going to get a fair hearing, just like anybody else is on campus. It's just a critical piece of it is that relationship and mutual respect and trust in what each person's role is in the crisis management.
How about with your head coaches? You mentioned the head coach and the involvement in handling crisis. How often are you talking to your head coaches and the young assistant coaches as well about chain of command in a crisis?
Well, we have mandatory coaches meetings. That's for every coach we have once a month. Now, do we hit this topic every time? Right. No, but we do annually at least talk about this. And really, I deal more in a crisis with the head coach. And I look to that head coach, whether it be a male or a female, to get his staff or her staff together and bring them up to speed. And sometimes we involve them all, but primarily it's pretty much the head coach. In football, you're talking soon to be 10 more coaches, to 10, because we're adding a 10th. And then that's just a huge staff.
Absolutely. Mary Ellen, how about with student athletes? Talked a little bit, Judy mentioned the coaches. How much are you talking to your student athletes about crisis now and nowadays with social media? That's changed how the world of, it's out on Twitter before sometimes you get a chance to put your plan in place.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things. One, we always do social media education when all of our student athletes come back. So freshman to senior year, you're all getting the social media education about being smart about what you post, being safe about what you post, but then also what are you reading out there and how do you respond to that? So we take care of that education. But the other piece is with all the current events that we've seen that have caused crisis situations, or really our focus on a crisis situation, we actually go through that with our SAC officers, and we meet with our coaches monthly as well as part of a leadership team, and we talk about these current events. And then the other piece that I'm a big fan of doing is taking student athletes via SAC or taking a head coaches group meeting through what I would call a crisis simulation or a case study. Is it a facility is immediately shut down? A lot of campuses today are doing active shooter crisis management case studies. The death of a student athlete, the death of a visiting team student athlete, and how you handle all that. And so putting that into place, one, you find out really how much does your staff or your student athletes know how to handle that, and then what kind of education you need to continue to give them to get involved in that or to be able to be prepared to handle situations like that.
Judy, you mentioned 42 years. What's changed with handling crisis management, and maybe what has not changed and what's still consistent?
I think most everything is consistent except with the advent of social media, the way everything is instantly out there. And it creates more crisis, oftentimes, because what's getting out there may or may not be the truth.
Right.
But it becomes viral so quickly. Trying to diffuse that and make sure that the facts we get out there, we want to control the facts. And if something gets out there that's not true, you're trying to undo some things. And we've had some instances on campus. One thing that's different, that we had a hazing incident, and we took all kind of steps that we had not done in the past. Like, we created a dark website, okay, ready to go out if we needed to go out with it. But we brought in outside advisors on it, and again, trying to control the message. In the past, we could control it. And sometimes you have very aggressive media, and sometimes they're lazy. When they're lazy, we usually don't like it. When they're lazy because they haven't done their homework and don't know the facts, and we don't want something out there until we're ready for it, I'm like thankful for those lazy media. But I will say social media is I think the toughest part of it.
Yeah. Both of you have been in the chair for several years, and I'm going to end on this question for both of you. Is, Mary Ellen, advice for young administrators coming up in this business? That's a big part of who our audience is and who will be watching these videos, and they're going to be watching saying, I want to be an athletic director one day, and how they handle a crisis may determine their career and their future. So how would you handle, or how would you talk to a young administrator about handling a crisis?
I think when you're a young professional, it's very hard to not blow up emotionally and dig right in, roll your sleeves up, and start to work in a silo. And I think if you can take a deep breath and realize, okay, what do I need to be doing now? I think communication, always notifying your supervisor, and it is okay to ask for help and tell somebody, I need help in handling this situation. When you take it all on your shoulders by yourself or operate in a silo, it's a recipe for disaster.
That's really good. Yeah. Judy?
Well, I want to share a quote from the session I attended yesterday on protecting your brand wealth. And it basically said, you will not be judged on what your good intentions were, but on how you acted in a crisis. You can look back on something and say, gosh, I should have done this, this, and this, and nobody's going to care about what you should have done. They're going to look at how you handled it. So preparation, always being prepared and having that plan and knowing what direction you're going to go in. That's
outstanding. Thank you both so much for this. I know our viewers are really going to enjoy it. This is it's been a very good session. I've learned a lot too from you ladies. So.
I feel like we should knock on wood. We're talking about crisis
yeah,
management.
We're going to go out today and check Twitter, right? What happened while we were in these 20 minutes? Thank you again. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.